Armored vehicles are en route to Tripoli, carrying men destined for the front lines. Libya's eastern forces, led by Khalifa Haftar, are openly declaring their intention to seize the capital and overthrow the internationally recognized government. This current offensive underscores a grim reality. Since Muammar Gaddafi's removal in 2011, Libya has been trapped in relentless turmoil, struggling to establish stable political structures. What began as an attempt to dismantle Gaddafi's regime spiraled into a complex, multi-phase civil war. Since 2014, the nation has been fractured between rival administrations, giving rise to countless militias and a pervasive state of lawlessness. Welcome to Lands of Stakes, where we unravel the intricate web of conflict and instability that has defined Libya since Muammar Gaddafi's fall, revealing the profound, unintended consequences of a nation's quest for freedom. Muammar Gaddafi ascended to power in Libya in 1969, orchestrating a military coup that deposed King Idris. He transformed Libya from a monarchy into a socialist state, leveraging nationalized oil revenues to fund extensive infrastructure projects and significant advancements in healthcare and education. Initially, Gaddafi pursued pan-Arab unity, aspiring to unite Arab countries. However, his focus gradually shifted to pan-Africanism, advocating for African unity and collaboration. Despite these ambitious initiatives, Gaddafi's regime was notorious for severe human rights violations, political oppression, and sponsoring international terrorism, including the 1988 Lockerbie bombing. His controversial leadership also drew global condemnation, leading to economic sanctions and increasing Libya's isolation due to his backing of militant groups and involvement in regional conflicts. In February 2011, inspired by the widespread influence of the Arab Spring, Libyans began to rise up. Protests ignited in Benghazi and rapidly spread to other cities, escalating into violent confrontations between Gaddafi's security forces and the opposition. By March 2011, the United Nations Security Council implemented a no-fly zone over Libya, followed by NATO airstrikes aimed at protecting civilians. Gaddafi famously declared he would show no mercy to his own people, comparing them to rats and threatening to go door to door to inflict punishment. As President Barack Obama stated, Gaddafi was the primary reason for war, poised to unleash a massacre on his own people, which was deemed contrary to international interests. In July of that year, the National Transitional Council, NTC, was internationally recognized as the legitimate government of Libya. In the subsequent weeks, the African Union, along with 60 other countries, also formally acknowledged the NTC. During this uprising against Gaddafi, numerous rebel groups emerged across Libya. Army units defected, particularly in the eastern region where the regime quickly collapsed, and in the western Zintan area, allowing rebels to utilize existing infrastructure and gain a strategic advantage. When Muammar Gaddafi's regime finally fell, most of these rebel units were loosely organized groups of fighters with minimal coordination among them. In August 2011, Muammar Gaddafi went into hiding as anti-Gaddafi rebels overwhelmed Tripoli, Libya's capital. On October 20, 2011, he was captured and killed when opposition forces seized the city of Sirte. Shortly after his death, the NTC declared Libya a free nation and announced plans to hold elections within 8 months. The NTC devised an 18-month transition plan, but its fragile structure quickly began to unravel. Following Gaddafi's fall, various rebel factions swiftly fortified their positions, looting arms depots and government offices in preparation for the post-war power struggle. The situation deteriorated over the years, and by 2016, Libya, with its population of 6 million, was estimated to possess 20 million weapons. These arms flowed through various channels, often ending up with terrorists and local militias due to the country's porous borders. This rampant arms trafficking allowed Libyan militias to assert their status within the broader social fabric. Weapons that were meant to be surrendered at the end of Libya's revolution remained in the hands of these rebel groups, solidifying their power. Additionally, some militias engaged in protection rackets or were hired to guard buildings and resources coveted by rival groups. The post-Gaddafi period offered significant business opportunities. Various militias coerced weak authorities into employing their members in public service. Other rebel groups, not driven by political motives, used their firepower to dominate cross-border smuggling operations involving drugs, subsidized goods like gasoline or flour, as well as illegal migrants from African countries heading to Europe. This lucrative trade flourished in the absence of a strong state, complicating the NTC's efforts to establish proper control over the country. Rather than being disarmed, Libya's numerous militias were financially supported by some political parties seeking to ensure their own protection. Politicians also attempted to co-opt former rebels by placing them on the state payroll as a supposed regular security force or army. Any militia, even Islamist militants like Ansar al-Sharia, gained access to government funds. It is estimated that the transitional government, which governed Libya from Gaddafi's fall until the 2012 national elections, dispersed over $1.4 billion to former rebels and individuals who claimed to have fought against Gaddafi. This, combined with the absence of a unified army or police force, allowed various militias to take control of nearly the entire country. In July 2012, the NTC handed over power to the newly elected General National Congress, GNC. Part of the GNC's mandate involved drafting a new constitution, establishing a legal framework for governance, and overseeing the disarmament of the various militias that had emerged during Libya's revolution. Unfortunately, the GNC faced significant challenges over the next 2 years, including internal divisions, political infighting, and the rise of armed groups competing for power. Libya was descending into disarray. In September 2012, Islamist militants launched an attack on the United States consulate in Benghazi, resulting in the deaths of 4 Americans, including U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens. Libya's discovery of oil in the late 1950s transformed its economy, making the oil sector vital as it contributes the majority of the country's GDP and government revenue, significantly shaping its geopolitical and economic landscape. After the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, various factions recognized Libyan oil production as crucial for securing power in a nation ravaged by political and military conflicts. In 2013, a man named Ibrahim Jadran became one of the first key figures in the fight for control over Libya's oil. Following the 2011 uprising, Libya's transitional government had assigned Ibrahim Jadran and his estimated 2,500 rebel fighters to protect the oil fields and ports. As the commander of this newly formed Petroleum Facilities Guard, PFG, the government force responsible for safeguarding national oil facilities, Ibrahim Jadran broke away from the government. He then imposed blockades on oil facilities, hampering production, and demanded the creation of a special commission to investigate the management of oil revenue during Muammar Gaddafi's tenure. Jadran blockaded oil export ports in 2013 and 2014 to demand more autonomy for eastern Libya, particularly over oil revenues, and to protest the National Oil Corporation's alleged corrupt management. This blockade by Ibrahim Jadran cost the state over $30 billion in lost oil revenues. In March 2014, Ibrahim Jadran gained international attention by allowing the oil tanker Morning Glory to depart from the eastern port of Sidra under the North Korean flag. This unauthorized shipment of oil was part of his broader effort to sell oil independently of the Libyan government, which he accused of corruption and neglecting the eastern region's needs. In retaliation, the Libyan government declared the shipment illegal and sought international assistance. The United States Navy intervened, intercepting and boarding the Morning Glory in international waters off Cyprus. The vessel was then escorted back to Libya under United States military authority, with its cargo returned to the Libyan government. Ibrahim Jadaran continued to be a controversial figure in the battle for Libya's oil resources following the Morning Glory incident. Despite multiple efforts by successive Libyan governments to negotiate with him, Jadaran maintained considerable influence due to his capacity to block or permit oil exports. In 2016, his position was significantly weakened when he lost control of the oil terminals to the newly formed Libyan National Army, LNA, led by General Khalifa Haftar, another major player in post-Gaddafi Libya. Since Muammar Gaddafi's fall, Libya's militants had engaged in sporadic, localized conflicts, typically lasting from a few hours to a few days until some form of ceasefire was brokered, allowing residents to resume their daily lives. However, the conflict in Libya escalated to a new level in May 2014 when Khalifa Haftar, a general from the Gaddafi era, launched an offensive against radical Islamists. Khalifa Haftar would become one of Libya's most polarizing figures. Born in 1943 in the eastern city of Ajdabiya, Khalifa Haftar was once an ally of Muammar Gaddafi, playing a key role in the 1969 coup that brought him to power. Their relationship soured in the 1980s following a disastrous Libyan military campaign in Chad. What happened next with Khalifa Haftar remains unclear. Some sources suggest he spent the following years in incarceration, while others claim he informed the Chadian government of his decision to oppose Muammar Gaddafi. This allegedly led to the establishment of training facilities for him and his men in N'Djamena, the capital city of Chad, as part of the Libyan National Army, LNA, the military wing of the opposition Libyan National Salvation Front. Around this time, connections between Khalifa Haftar and the United States CIA began to surface. According to the New York Times, American intelligence services, with the approval of then-President Ronald Reagan, funded and assisted in training Khalifa Haftar and his 350 troops in sabotage and other guerrilla skills in Chad as part of efforts to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. When Hissène Habre's government in Chad was overthrown in 1990, the United States sought a new refuge for Khalifa Haftar and his troops. After unsuccessful attempts to settle them in Kenya and in then Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United States government ultimately granted Khalifa Haftar and his men asylum and brought them to the United States. The next chapter of Khalifa Haftar's life took an unexpected turn as he spent the next 20 years living a seemingly quiet life with his family in suburban Virginia. This period fueled further rumors of his involvement with the CIA, especially given that his home in Falls Church, Virginia, was just a few kilometers from the CIA headquarters in Langley. The New York Times reported that Khalifa Haftar himself admitted to frequently speaking with the CIA during his time in Virginia. Despite living in the United States, Haftar remained in contact with Libyan opposition groups. He returned to Libya in March 2011, reassembling former members of the army units he once commanded. Haftar maintained a low profile, mostly staying in eastern Libya, until February 2014, when he released a video in front of a Libyan flag announcing a coup against the GNC due to its failure to address the apparent growing Islamist threat in Libya. His televised announcement was met with great scorn and ridicule in many parts of the world, but this did not deter the general's resolve. In May 2014, Khalifa Haftar launched a military campaign called Operation Libya Dignity against the Islamist group Ansar al-Sharia, as well as other Islamist factions. This war, initiated by Khalifa Haftar in May 2014, marked the beginning of Libya's full descent into total chaos. In his initial public statements, General Haftar branded Islamists of all kinds as terrorists. In his numerous addresses, General Haftar declared that the Islamists had only three options: to leave the country, be killed, or be arrested. This rhetoric by the general, unsurprisingly, united the previously warring Islamist factions against him. In retaliation, the Islamists formed alliances under the name Libya Dawn and launched offensives in other parts of the country. Eventually, fighting erupted at Tripoli's international airport between the Libya Dawn coalition, which controlled Tripoli and much of western Libya, and Khalifa Haftar's Libya Dignity Coalition, which controlled parts of Cyrenaica and Benghazi in eastern Libya. This escalation turned the conflict into a full-scale civil war. Elections in June 2014 saw a significant defeat for the Islamists, who previously held government power, with voter turnout representing less than half of those eligible to vote. Islamist lawmakers in Libya's GNC rejected the election results for this new parliament, which was to be called the House of Representatives. The coalition of armed Islamist groups, Libya Dawn, went on to reinstate the outgoing GNC in Tripoli, which became known as the National Salvation Government, NSG. At the same time, the newly elected parliament, the House of Representatives, convened in the eastern city of Tobruk, under the protection of General Khalifa Haftar's forces. The absence of central authority in Libya created an opportunity for the militant extremist group ISIS. Exploiting the power vacuum and local conflicts, ISIS gained control and recruited fighters, while other militants held much of Benghazi and Derna. ISIS's power in Libya peaked in 2016 with the capture of Sirte, its most significant stronghold outside of Syria and Iraq. The rise of ISIS in Libya destabilized the Sahel region, facilitating the flow of arms and militants, which worsened conflicts in Mali, Niger, and Chad. In July 2018, General Khalifa Haftar announced that his LNA had recaptured Derna, the last ISIS outpost in eastern Libya. Despite this, ISIS fighters remained active, operating small desert camps and staging occasional attacks in Libya. As alluded to before, Libya had descended into full chaos. In response to the escalating conflict and ensuing humanitarian crisis, the United Nations facilitated negotiations between the rival factions in Libya, including General Khalifa Haftar, leading to the Libyan Political Agreement, LPA, which was signed in December 2015 in Skhirat, Morocco. Under the terms of the United Nations-led LPA, a Government of National Accord, GNA, was established in Tripoli. Despite strong international backing, Libya's newly formed GNA struggled with domestic recognition, as the House of Representatives and its armed allies, including General Haftar, refused to consent. In August 2018, violence erupted in Tripoli, the capital, disrupting a period of relative calm. However, the United Nations quickly brokered a ceasefire between the involved militias in September 2018. Meanwhile, the struggle for control of Libya's oil intensified. In January 2018, the House of Representatives in the East appointed its own governor to the eastern branch of the central bank, deepening the division between the bank's eastern and western branches. In June of that year, Ibrahim Jadran, the warlord mentioned earlier, and his forces returned and seized control of the oil ports of Ras Lanuf and Sidra. But General Khalifa Haftar and his forces managed to recapture these ports from Ibrahim Jadran. The general then declared that all oil ports under his control would be managed by the Eastern National Oil Corporation, supported by the House of Representatives, with revenues being directed to the eastern branch of the central bank. However, the international community quickly reaffirmed its commitment to trading exclusively with the Tripoli-based National Oil Corporation. Tensions between Libya's GNA and General Khalifa Haftar's LNA escalated in April 2019 when the general launched an offensive to capture Tripoli. Haftar's ambitions were supported by substantial international backing. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia provided military aid, funding, and political support, viewing the general as a counterbalance to Islamist militias and a means to secure regional stability. The offensive by the general began on April 4, 2019, with his forces rapidly advancing towards Tripoli. However, they stalled on the outskirts, making only minimal gains over the next year, a setback for Haftar, who had ordered his troops to liberate Tripoli. This raised fears of a major confrontation with the UN-recognized government. At the GNA's request, Turkey sent troops to Tripoli in early 2020 to bolster the city's defense, increasing their presence ahead of the GNA counteroffensive. United Nations-led mediation efforts made little progress as the conflict intensified and civilian casualties rose through May 2020. The resulting chaos in Libya allowed foreign mercenaries, including Russia's infamous Wagner paramilitary company, to exploit the situation and establish a presence within the country, even taking control of some of Libya's oil fields. In August 2020, violence eased as the GNA declared a unilateral ceasefire, and General Khalifa Haftar ended an oil blockade shortly after, paving the way for a nationwide ceasefire signed in October. This ceasefire led to the formation of the Interim Government of National Unity, GNU, in March 2021, aiming to unify Libya's fragmented political landscape and prepare for national elections. The formation of the GNU raised expectations for political stability and the prospect of holding parliamentary and presidential elections in December 2021. However, the elections were indefinitely postponed due to a lack of preparation and ongoing disagreements among various political forces about the legal framework for the election. From 2011 to the present, Libya has experienced profound trials and struggles. The overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi initially sparked hope for a democratic transition, but instead, the nation was plunged into prolonged conflict and fragmentation. When asked on the U.S. TV program Fox News Sunday what his biggest mistake in office had been, U.S. President Barack Obama stated, "Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya." Despite international efforts and some progress toward political agreements, Libya remains a nation in search of stability and reconciliation. In the heart of Tripoli, thousands gathered to commemorate the 13th anniversary of the Libyan revolution that toppled longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Libya has been engulfed in conflict and political division since then, but people are still celebrating. As one participant shared, the February 17th revolution means change from the dictatorship to a democratic and civil state. It was necessary and came after decades of oppression and injustice. Another added, "Today means so much to the Libyan people. Despite the conflict, the political divisions, the difficult economic situation, all these people celebrating is evidence that the revolution will continue and we will succeed." Thank you for tuning in to Lands of Stakes.